I thought I was so cool to think of this by myself until I looked on YouTube and found a bunch of people who speculated the same thing already, but I'm making the video anyway, because my 2 cents are just as valuable as anyone else's. That's literally how money works. This vid will argue for the practicality and motivations behind the idea that Marshadow could be underneath Mimikyu's hood, and I didn't watch any other theories on it, but I'd still bet on my reasoning being valid and original. Nintendo or Game Freak or the Pokemon Company or whoever's behind the movies could seriously make a coherently plotted Marshadow Mimikyu film based on the yarn I'm about to spin, but first we need to be on the same page with background information on the two mysterious figures in question. Most of what we know about Mimikyu, we don't, actually, because this lore is essentially a collection of inconsistent ghost stories told around campfires. People say Mimikyu's true form will either cause you to die of shock or fall mysteriously ill, and its motivations are disputed between loneliness-wanting friends, a more malicious wolf in sheep's clothing type of deal, or simply just craving the popularity of Pikachu as a cosplay enthusiast. People know very little about Mimikyu, and ignorance breeds conspiracy, which in this case breeds possibility. You see, whether or not Game Freak actually designed the details of Mimikyu and Marshadow to purposely intertwine, the point is that they easily could take the idea and run with it. The option is clear and present. More on that later. For now, let's draw some damn comparisons. Marshadow is a ghost fighting type, which is ironic because Game Freak seemingly cannot overstate how much of a coward this thing is, going so far as to call it craven, which if you're unfamiliar with medieval speak means contemptibly lacking in courage. It's the word contemptibly that's very important here. Contempt is disapproval tinged with disgust, which in this context could mean one of two things. Either Marshadow detests humanity and other Pokemon as its overt reason for being elusive, or it holds itself in contempt, possibly upset over how cowardly it can't help but be. Marshadow is a master of disguise, which is what brings it in line with Mimikyu. It is said to use shadow powers to conceal itself, and even more telling, it can also use these powers to mimic the movements and powers of its opponents. Marshadow learns moves like Copycat, Roleplay, Psych Up, even Endeavor is essentially copying your enemy's health by forcing it down to your level. Now, a question this poses is that if Marshadow was so good at copying other creatures, why does the Mimikyu disguise, which is supposed to resemble Pikachu, look like a child made it? Why indeed? There's plenty of valid questions you can pose, like how a 2'4" Marshadow can fit into an 8-inch tall Mimikyu disguise, how Mimikyu can be breedable and hatch out of an egg wearing the same disguise, how Marshadow gains the fairy type after donning the disguise. I think I have acceptable answers for all of them, and some of them might seem like cop-outs, but you have to know that giving a Pokemon the ability to mimic all other creatures and their powers tends to create some cheap narrative shortcuts when you build a story around them. It's like whenever the Flash is fighting someone who isn't a speedster, and he still manages to somehow get hit by stray, ultra-slow-moving punches all the time, you have minutes within your own brain to dodge these attacks, and you don't. Anyway, this is my proposed plan for the origin story of Mimikyu. Now, in terms of where it fits into a movie, this would be like a third of it, told in revealing snippets littered throughout whatever overarching issue is happening in the present time. And again, Mimikyu could very easily not be Marshadow, but also very easily, Game Freak could just decide that it is and build a plot around that idea. Before there were Mimikyu, there was Marshadow. And maybe the legends of Mimikyu were true, that seeing it in its true form did bring death and illness to all who gazed. Maybe Marshadow didn't start out biologically inclined to avoid everything with eyes. Maybe it was friendly, it wanted companionship, but for some reason everyone it tried to love and play with either got terribly sick and died, or you could focus on the one aspect of the legend where seeing it simply strikes deep, inconsolable fear into everyone. I think that's an easier jumping off point to build from, plus it's more kid-friendly, at least a little. So Marshadow scares everyone away inadvertently, and seeing the way it is received by people in Pokemon is traumatic for it as well. Seeing what it does to people, how it breaks the very fabric of their sanity, it doesn't want to cause irreparable harm to everybody's minds, so it remains hidden, concealed from the world. Until one day, a particular child stumbles upon it, and this child, for some reason or another, is unaffected by Marshadow. Doesn't really matter how. Hell, you could even make the kid blind. But this child is a cheerful, carefree soul whose infectious energy and spirit eventually draws Marshadow in, and they become the best of friends. Meanwhile, outside of the flashbacks and present time, Ash and his friends are trying to stop an army of Mimikyu from being used to take over the world, whatever. Like I said, I'm only concerned with the origin part. So, the child and Marshadow play alone in the forest or whatever, secluded, and it's fun and all for a while. But eventually the kid wants to bring Marshadow back to his home to meet his family and neighbors and everyone because he doesn't know anything about the lore. Marshadow naturally can't allow it, and that's where I can see this story going one of two ways. Either Marshadow, against its own judgment, simply agrees in the end to come back with the kid, causes a catastrophe ending in many people being carted off to sanitariums, and then disappears in despair for a while before the child goes into the forest looking for it, finds himself, or herself, doesn't matter, in danger from some unruly Pokemon, forces Marshadow to rescue him because their friendship connection is stronger than two separate earth-shattering traumas, and then the child reveals to Marshadow a Pikachu disguise he made for Marshadow to wear so that something like this never happens again. Or Marshadow refuses to come back with the kid, so the kid goes home, makes the costume, brings it back, Marshadow accepts it with a lot less collateral damage. Depends on how dark you want the story to be. Now remember, Marshadow is a master of disguise, and can become basically anything it wants. That's why I think, out of respect for the child's effort and kindness, it gave itself the size and dimension properties to fit inside the costume that the child made way too small. It gave itself over to the joyous emotions, and became fairy-type because it no longer had any inner battles to fight. It gave itself the ability to love and care again, which let it breed with no reservations. Being genderless, its first partner was unfortunately a Ditto, but that's a whole nother story entirely. And keep in mind, this could have happened hundreds of years prior to the present, where the baby Marshadow that hatched in the early days were taught to create and keep their own Mimikyu disguises, and then over generations of time, it became so natural to the species that they started being born in them. So that's my pitch. I don't know if Marshadow becomes Mimikyu, but I know it would be a damn good story if it did. That's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed it, you can like, share, and subscribe. If you're new to the channel, I've got another series called Tragic Pokedex Entries where I go in depth on how bad it would suck to be certain Pokemon based on what we know of their lives. I was going to do Mimikyu for episode 3, but it turned into this. Maybe more will. Alright, see you next time.